welcome to this episode of Tuesdays with Liz, the Disability Policy for All. This is the fourth episode of our Research for All series to make research accessible to people with disability. Today I'm here with Sherry Larson from the Institute on Community Integration. We're going to talk about the data available through the Residential Information System Project.
So the Residential Information Systems Project has been going since 1977, and we ask questions of state IDD agencies that help us understand what's happening in long-term supports and services. And our 5 key questions that we answer are, first of all, how many people have intellectual or developmental disabilities? Secondly, how many people with IDD get paid supports? Third, where do people who get supports live? Fourth, how do the places people live differ by age and by state? And then finally, we want to know how have the places that people have with IDD live changed over time?
That sounds great. For what year is data available?
We have historic data going back to 1977 for Medicaid ICF facilities. And then Charlie Lakin, who was the founder of the RISC project, for his some of his graduate work, went back to the 1880s and identified how many people with IDD lived in state institutions. And so we have that piece of information back to 1880. But we collect data every year. And so our current, we're finishing up our report for fiscal 2020 data. And that data should be on our website very soon.
Thank you. So this data is great because we both can see how different states compare to each other, and we can also see where there has been improvement or no improvement in direct care over time. Did I summarize that correctly?
That sounds great.
Okay. What are two to three short examples of some of the most important key findings for this data this year?
Yeah, so looking at the key questions here, one of the things that we've done for 2020 now, we get information from the CDC about how many people in the United States have intellectual or developmental disabilities, and we think that there's about 6.1 million children with intellectual disabilities, autism, or developmental delays. Of those, about 3.2 million have intellectual disabilities or autism spectrum disorder, and about 20% of those kids are served by state IDD agencies. We also think that there's about 2.28 million adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we know that state IDD agencies serve about 44% of those adults. In terms of where do people get supports live, about 62% of all people who get supports live with their families, and most people who are not getting supports through state IDD agencies also live with their families throughout their lives. So those are a couple of pieces. The final piece that I wanted to, I've got 2 more that I want to highlight. One other thing that I want to point out is we work with the CDC on Healthy People 2030. They have a goal to reduce the number of people with intellectual or developmental disabilities who live in places with 7 or more people, either state IDD institutions or ICF, intermediate care facilities for people with intellectual or developmental disabilities, nursing homes, or psychiatric facilities. We think that there are about 100,000 people who still live in those places. That's about 20% of the people, or 1 in 5 of the people who live in places other than with their family member. And finally, the the piece that we've added to our data collection this year is we took a look because of COVID. We asked states to tell us of the people who were served on their caseloads, how many died in each year. And we were able to detect an increase of about 13% in the proportion of people on the state IDD agency caseloads who died in 2022 compared to in 2019 before COVID. So that people who are interested in that can look forward to more information on our website, which is listed here, risp.umn.edu, in the very near future.
Thank you. Another follow-up question. I know we interviewed Shay Tennis from State of the States,
Yes.
and I know that project has a lot to do with institution. How do your project and that project, what are the differences?
That's a really good question. When Shay and I present together, Shay will talk about how her project follows the money and figures out what kind of services our people get and how much money is spent on those services. And the RISP project really focuses a little bit differently. We look at how many people have intellectual or developmental disabilities. We do track the institutionalization. But we track some other things that the State of the States doesn't. For example, we look at the differences between children and adults in terms of where they live and what kind of services they get. And we also have added some information in our 2023 survey, so that data is not out yet, but asking about race and ethnicity of people who are getting services. And so one of the things that we do that's different from what State of the States does is to look at the characteristics of people getting services. And then the last thing that I would highlight that's different is both projects go to state agencies that serve people with intellectual or developmental disabilities and survey them every year. But the RISP project, in addition to surveying the states, we also survey the state-run facilities that still serve people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There's about 106 of those places left. And so we know a lot about who's still living in institution and how have things changed in institution, whereas Shay focuses on information about people's use of technology and how the use of personal devices and other technologies are helping people to live the lives that they choose to live. So we share some things that we ask. We both ask about where do people live and about money, but we focus on those things a little bit differently. So both projects have pieces of information that are helpful to advocates. They're just a slight bit different.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sherry, for your time, and I look forward to talking with everyone next month. Have a great month. Bye.
Bye, all.